For decades, Hollywood has been surrounded by whispers that most people either ignored or laughed off. Back in the early 1990s, long before social media or viral clips, several former child actors and insiders came forward with disturbing claims about what they said was happening behind closed doors. These weren't random internet personalities or anonymous bloggers. These were people who had grown up inside the system, people who claimed they had seen things that didn't make sense at the time, things they were told never to speak about. When law enforcement was mentioned, critics quickly dismissed these claims as paranoia or attention-seeking. The idea that powerful figures could operate without consequences seemed too extreme for the public to accept. Mainstream media treated these individuals as unstable, branding their stories as wild fantasies. Careers quietly stalled, opportunities disappeared, and the message became clear without ever being said out loud. Speaking up came with a price. Years later, as old interviews resurfaced online, people began noticing something unsettling. Many of these early accusations followed eerily similar patterns, despite coming from different people who had never publicly worked together. At the time, no one connected the dots, but with hindsight, the dismissals began to feel less like skepticism and more like damage control. And among all those forgotten voices, one unexpected name kept resurfacing, forcing people to look back and ask whether these warnings were ignored on purpose. At the height of his career, Mel Gibson was one of the most powerful stars in Hollywood. He wasn't just an actor, he was a box office guarantee, a director with creative control, and someone who didn't rely on studio approval to succeed. Then, almost overnight, his reputation collapsed. Public controversies dominated headlines, and the narrative around him shifted dramatically. He was no longer portrayed as talented or influential, but as unstable, dangerous, and toxic to work with. Studios quietly stopped calling. Projects vanished. Invitations dried up. While the public was told this was about bad behavior, some insiders claimed something deeper was happening. Gibson allegedly refused to conform to certain unspoken expectations within the industry. According to people familiar with the situation, he didn't blend in socially the way others did, and he openly questioned things most people avoided discussing. Over time, critics noticed a pattern. Gibson wasn't just criticized, he was erased. His fall served as a warning to others who might consider stepping out of line. Years later, when viewers revisited old footage of his interviews, some realized his downfall aligned suspiciously well with moments when he appeared most outspoken. That timing raised an uncomfortable question. Was Mel Gibson truly pushed out because of controversy, or because he became inconvenient to those with influence? Wanted to produce The Passion of the Christ, a deeply religious film centered entirely on faith, suffering, and redemption. Studio after studio refused to touch it. Executives claimed it was too controversial, too risky, and too divisive for mainstream audiences. With no institutional backing, Gibson funded the project himself, putting his own fortune on the line. What happened next shocked the industry. The film became a global phenomenon, earning hundreds of millions of dollars and proving that studios had misjudged both the audience and the demand. Instead of celebrating the success, backlash intensified. Accusations resurfaced. Media criticism became harsher. The tone suggested that Gibson's independence itself was the problem. He had proven that a filmmaker didn't need Hollywood's permission to succeed. For some, this wasn't just about religion. It was about control. After the film's release, Gibson's standing didn't improve. It deteriorated further. His success failed to rehabilitate his image, which only fueled speculation that something beyond money or ratings was at play. And this wouldn't be the last time he supported a project that others were unwilling to publicly stand behind. Years later, Gibson's name resurfaced in connection with Sound of Freedom, a film centered on child trafficking and undercover rescue operations. Once again, the project struggled to gain mainstream support despite its subject matter. Distribution was delayed, marketing was minimal, and major studios kept their distance. Yet, when the film finally reached audiences, it performed far beyond expectations. Viewers responded emotionally, and word of mouth propelled it into mainstream conversation. Online discussions quickly connected the film's themes to real-world scandals involving elites and abuse allegations. As public interest grew, people noticed the similarities between this situation and Gibson's past experiences. Once again, a film highlighting uncomfortable topics succeeded without Hollywood's blessing. Once again, Gibson was involved behind the scenes. And once again, critics attempted to discredit the conversation by attacking the people associated with the project rather than addressing its message. To many observers, it felt like history repeating itself. The question became unavoidable. Why did stories like this face resistance, even when public interest was undeniable? One figure closely tied to Gibson's controversial projects is Jim Caviezel. Known for portraying deeply moral and faith-driven characters, Caviezel became a recurring collaborator with Gibson. Over time, Caviezel began speaking openly about his discomfort within the industry, suggesting that Hollywood punished those who didn't conform ideologically or socially. After participating in films with heavy moral themes, Caviezel claimed his career stalled despite prior success. He described being marginalized, overlooked, and quietly pushed aside. Observers noticed similarities between his trajectory and Gibson's earlier experiences. Both men achieved success independently, both supported projects others avoided, and both faced professional consequences afterward. Their collaboration on Sound of Freedom reignited discussions about whether Hollywood selectively elevates or suppresses voices based on compliance rather than talent. Caviezel's willingness to speak publicly only intensified scrutiny, with critics framing his comments as extreme while supporters viewed them as courageous. The parallels were impossible to ignore, especially as new information began surfacing elsewhere. When documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein resurfaced and circulated widely online, the public reaction was explosive. Names, connections, and timelines reignited discussions that had been dismissed years earlier. Clips of old interviews went viral, and statements once labeled insane were suddenly re-examined with fresh eyes. People began asking why warnings were ignored and why consequences seemed